Hi everyone, I'm Marla Kaplowitz, CEO of the 4A's, and we're here for another edition of Convene.Challenge.Change. And we're going to do something a little different today. We're not going to talk as much about work as we are about client-agency partnerships and how they can be in it together. And so if you think about the challenges that agencies are facing today, it's really difficult in this day and age to have a partnership, to not be treated as a vendor, especially in a time where agencies are forced to do more for less. And we want to have a conversation about how agencies and clients not only can facilitate a better partnership, but move out of that vendor dynamic and also focus more on long-term opportunities. So joining me today is Jason Sperling, Chief Creative Officer of Innocean, and Marissa Thalberg, a Forbes Hall of Fame CMO. So I'm going to start with Jason, and I know you have a lot of opinions on this, but what do you really believe drives the best creative work, and how do you manifest that with clients?
I think first and foremost is trust, and trust is earned. So it's obviously that comes over a certain amount of time. I think there's a respect, a mutual respect for each other. But I think most importantly is really a shared understanding of what are the goals of the work we're doing, and making sure that every decision you make, be it extremely creative or be it anything else, is in sort of the interest of the business and making sure that we're doing we're helping the company, helping partners like Marissa reach their goals. Surpass our goals if we're doing our jobs right.
I think that's absolutely what needs to happen. It's just sometimes it doesn't deliver. That's the challenge. What do you think are some of the factors responsible for the lost connection between agency and client, especially over, I would say, changes that have happened in the industry in the last 5 years?
I think Jason is talking about it in the way that I think about it from a client perspective. And if you want to get the right work from an agency, I think it does start with trust and safety, which doesn't mean that you're easygoing necessarily about it, but there's a difference between challenging for great work and thinking that the way to do that is fear-based. I don't agree with that at all. Or to have the kind of this, I describe it as the sort of like arms crossed posture, like kind of like sitting back and saying, prove it to me. I think the second that you engage with an agency, you have to treat them like an extended part of your team because they are. So the way I talk to agency is no different than I talk to my own team because I see you as part of the team, which means like I want you to empathize with what the real situation is. I want you to understand what the dynamics of the business are. I want you to understand what the keep me up at night issues are. And then I want you to be my partner in solving those problems because that is really, and I've been talking about this a lot, the true definition of creativity. Creativity is new ways of solving problems. And I think here we are at the Global Festival of Creativity. We need to be framing creativity the right way and not something that is gratuitous or simply about getting awards for awards' sake or vanity. We are in a commercial business and it is about applying great thinking, great ideas to have an impact. So when you're aligned that way, it can be wonderful. When you're misaligned, that's where that gap that you just asked about can happen.
Why do you think that's happening more today in terms of that gap? I want to hear from both of you about what is the disconnect that is negatively impacting that client-agency relationship to truly be a partnership.
Wait, I was going to ask you what you think first. I'm curious, how does it feel from your seat?
Well,
do you feel like it's gotten worse?
I do, and actually I just came to this job from actually being on the client side and being an agency interface. At one point, there were 12 agencies that were sort of under reporting into me, and it was not always the case where I felt like there was that real alignment on what our goals were, and that agencies were sort of in it together. And I came, with the approach of like, hey, I just came from the agency side. I know what's important, and I know that, you know, while you're working on this, there's other, you know, tangential goals that you're trying to reach, and I want to help you reach those too. So I do think some of it comes from agency approach, and there is some of it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because as you start to minimize an agency, and whether it's minimizing projects or minimizing the security of them having the account or the business or the relationship, you know, then it becomes, oh God, we need to keep feeding the new business machine in order to supplement where, you know, we don't want to have to lay off a certain number of people every time a client who is less loyal or less involved. And so, you know, in order to not be laying off all the time, you've got to be winning all the time. But I do feel like it's a combination of some of that agency behavior, but also the industry having to sort of, you know, tighten the belt. It's also the sort of the breakout of specializations, and so there's a pervasive belief that what used to be a sort of holistic agency, whatever we call it these days, traditional, integrated, there's now, well, can they do it as good as an agency that is purely social, or is purely programmatic, or is purely something else? And so, you know, it's hard for an agency to sort of hold on to the totality of a business and the totality of a relationship, so that they just become part of the herd, so to speak. You know, you're one of my 10 agencies that works on the same piece of business, and you get this project and another group gets this project, and it just diminishes, I think, what is special and what I think is really important, which is this connection. You know, the ability to have open conversations and to I'm talking a lot. Go ahead, Marissa.
No, I'm just listening and thinking there's so many different ways to build on what you're saying, because I mean, for my own current role and past roles, I see everything you're saying, and I've been in this business long enough that when I started in the agency world, of course, it was bundled together, you know, media creative. Then we went through the great unbundling. Now you're describing a bit of the, you know, the specialist agencies, which I will certainly say as a CMO, like that has been an inclination oftentimes, but then part of your role as a CMO is to be the conductor, the orchestra leader, of trying to create, and everyone doesn't necessarily play as well in the sandbox, because everyone's nervous and thinking that there's, you know, there's more territory to scrape. But the other part that I want to weigh in is, even when the CMO is your biggest advocate, there's a lot of pressure on CMOs now from others, from who don't understand this the way we do, yet you know, approach it from they read, like, a little knowledge being a dangerous thing. They read a few articles and it's like, why aren't we just insourcing all of this? That's a big one right now. Why isn't AI just doing all this? Why do we need an agency? Or just simply, you gotta cut your budget 15%. Well, where are you gonna get that? These become line items. So I think for me, it's not so much disconnect as just the tension points and pressure points that just are force, like, you to maybe make decisions that you wouldn't have made earlier, or to pressure the financials and turn into the agency. And it almost across the board, it's not because the CMO is being a jerk. It's usually because the pressures that they're under, but then that in turn, of course, has a ripple effect. So then, I mean, just then going back to the work itself, I mean, we chose Jason and his team. They genuinely won, like, first big new brand campaign in years for SeaWorld, because, I mean, one of the things that was so striking is they really got the brief. And that feels almost like an old school thing to say in the course of everything else we're saying. But, you know, the heart of it goes back to our first comments. They got the assignment. They got the assignment. So when you feel heard, that helps bridge that disconnect.
So let's talk about when you do have a strong relationship and you have a long-term partnership. what are some of the factors that really contribute to that? And if you can name any that you can think of those long-term client-agency relationships, I think that's important for people to understand as well.
Oh, well, it's always difficult to sort of see what's actually happening behind the scenes, but certainly from what you can tell from work being produced and long-term relationships between agencies and clients, I would say the work being done for Geico to me is I think a result of trust within one particular partner over a long period of time, who's continually, I think, performed, evolved, and done work across multiple channels that I think, number one, is really smart and I think propels the business forward. There are certain things you can pull out of the work that they've done. So simple, a caveman can do it, 15 minutes can save you 15%. Built on really solid, smart thinking that is, turned into incredible work, award-winning work. But that could only, I think, come from, a long-term relationship where they understand sort of the ins and outs and the pressures that the folks are under, and they're working intently to do it. Apple, I worked on Apple for a long time, and there was a very long-standing trust built between, and also too, I would say, a real foundational understanding of the brand. And I think, sometimes there is the sort of like, there's a lot of shiny objects out there, but I think there is real evidence that having that long time understanding and trust built between, whether it was Steve Jobs or now Tor Myron and partners, that they can really, I think, develop smart work that solves whatever problem it is, and beyond that they're working even beyond what's being briefed.
I just want to say I love that this conversation is between a CMO and Chief Creative Officer.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is really special.
That's different.
Okay, and honestly, because you think it's just going to be, and it could also be with the CEO, president of the agency, or the head of the account. But for me, a big piece of this is an agency that allows this partnership to be genuine, real, communicative, and direct.
Mm-hmm.
Jason and I, through this whole process, were texting each other, and we get on the phone and we talk. And no one got threatened by that to my knowledge. And it honestly was really about being able to be thought partners with each other, and me challenging him and him challenging me. That to me is really, really special. And then in the long-term question, I've had some long-standing agency relationships in the past. For example, Deutsche LA was my agency that I inherited when I got to Taco Bell.
Right.
So I think that's really important too, is I don't think the idea when you come in is just to immediately be like, new sheriff in town, because that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes change is necessary. What happened for me is I went from Taco Bell to Lowe's, and it was then COVID hit. And really getting to the heart of your question, I realized I needed an agency that, as they joked, already spoke Marissa. Because I didn't have time to, I just didn't have time.
Right.
And so, again, that goes back to the building the trust, the building the connection is like, I needed a shortcut to how we're gonna solve a problem together.
All right, in one sentence, final thought on how to be in it together.
In one sentence.
Huh? It's like you're writing copy, fast.
Directness, openness, and honesty at all times.
Great.
Partner mindset versus vendor mindset.
Excellent. I think you both have shared really important thoughts, and we are in CAN and focusing on creativity. And creativity only happens when you have that trust and that partnership. And I think your point about working with a CCO is excellent, and I hope this has been helpful. So thank you.